Hi, my name is Norbert Sparrow. I'm editor of European Medical Device Technology and MedTech Insider. I'm here at the MedTech Forum in Brussels. We're in a lounge, so excuse the noise. But we did manage to corral three people with in-depth knowledge of the medical device industry, and in particular of the small to medium-sized enterprises and the challenges that they face here in Europe and in the United States. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Norbert. First of all, it's great to be corralled in such an important occasion and on such an important topic. My name is Sharon Higgins. I'm the director of the Irish Medical Devices Association and also a member of EUCAMED. We have a national associations network which I play an active role in, and I chair an SME task force across Europe. So SMEs are very critical to the innovation engine of the industry in Europe, and the topics that we'll be talking about here today I think will be very important to us all.
Thank you, Norbert. My name is Steve Sagan. I'm the president and CEO of CardioFocus. CardioFocus is helping physicians see inside the heart while they're performing catheter ablation procedures. And as novel as it is in our field, physicians have been using visualization to help them accomplish medical device procedures for tens of years now, and it's just odd that it's taken so long to get inside the heart. So we're very excited about what we're doing. I appreciate the invitation to talk.
Hi Norbert, very nice to meet you. My name is John O'Dea. I'm CEO of an Irish medical device company called Crossbon. Crossbon is a little over 5 years old, and we manufacture a imaging catheter which is used by bariatric surgeons and general surgeons for measuring dimensions in the esophagus and stomach to allow them to calibrate their surgical procedures more accurately.
Wonderful. Let me begin by mentioning that SMEs account for approximately 80% of the EU MedTech industry. They're the leading edge in innovation, and that's the case also in the United States. As a matter of fact, we heard that at the session just earlier. How would you characterize the similarities and the differences between the United States and Europe from a business and regulatory perspective? And specifically, is one location more conducive to bringing life-saving medical technology to the market? And if so, are there trade-offs in device safety? John, would you like to start with that?
Well, when you use the term life-saving, I suppose it has connotations of higher risk devices, and certainly I think it's important to stratify between low risk devices and high risk devices, because I think there's a different story for both those types of devices. And certainly in terms of the low risk devices that we are involved in, we find that the processes are not hugely different. In Europe there's a lot of change going on in the regulatory process now, which is adding some extra challenges for manufacturers in terms of the work they have to do to get approvals that maybe didn't exist before the new medical device directive came in 2007. From a high risk standpoint, I'll leave my colleague here to maybe talk about that, but certainly from a low risk standpoint, I think we are finding now that the system, I suppose with this culling process of notified bodies that's going to be going on, that all the notified bodies are being expected to up their game. There's additional oversight from the competent authorities, and what we're finding is that the low risk devices are perhaps seeing a lot more regulation than they used to be, to the extent in my view that really the difference in Europe and the US isn't that particularly different for low risk devices.
Stephen, I believe you have a different point of view on this.
Well, CardioFocus is a Class 3 medical device company based in the US. And most of our investors are US venture capitalists. And it became quite clear that the fastest access to the commercial markets would be through Europe. But it's not an exclusive concern of our company. We're trying to get a medical device approved for the world's largest medical device market, which is the United States. And we knew that we would have to undertake a clinical investigation to get that product approved in the US. But if we had started on that pathway and pursued that activity exclusively, we would have been waiting years for important feedback in the development of the device. So having the capacity to go to Europe, to perform some initial small-scale investigations and get important answers as to the future direction of the company and the product was of crucial importance. It's a dividend, the fact that with that small initial investigation, we were also able to acquire the CE mark, and with that CE mark, commercialize the product in selected areas in Europe. So it's really a compound activity but all in support of eventually being able to get a product approved in the U.S.
Very good. Sharon, at IMDA, you deal with startups and with multinationals. What do you think about this?
Well, I think what's clear at the moment is that there are two major regulatory systems in the world globally at the moment. You've got the FDA in the US and you've got the European Commission and the whole medical devices legislation in Europe. They're quite different, and both are under review at the moment and under different models as well. In the US, the FDA is obviously looking at how best it can ensure that patients get access to products, and equally the same can be said of the EU. But while they're different, we would contend they're both very effective. The changes that are being proposed now under the current legislative changes coming through from the Commission are by and large all welcomed by industry. There's a lot of positive things happening there, but ultimately they're two different models, but they're both effective, I suppose, is what we would say right now. It's really important to realise that for small startup companies, the more regulation you add that does not add value to the process, the more you undermine their ability to survive ultimately, and it's their survival that will enable the overall growth of the industry.
Right. Just to digress for a moment there, you may recall Jeffrey Shuren famously said that the EU was using patients as guinea pigs, suggesting that the U.S. system is much safer. What do you think of that, Sharon?
Well, the evidence doesn't agree with that. So there have been many reports that have looked into this issue, and what they have shown is that while the systems are different, they start from a different premise and they ultimately end with effective products. We can argue from here to kingdom come about whether, which is wrong or right, but both are effective ultimately, we would say. And I think that the particular comments that were made have been both by some consultants that have looked at it, but also by the Commissioner for Health in Europe, Commissioner Dalli, completely been repudiated. So I would disagree.
Yes. Gentlemen, any comments on
Well,
that?
I think really it comes down to whether you want to be involved in the development process or not. And to have a seat at the table in the development process does involve using medical devices at an early stage. Ethical committees, protocols, physicians' own behavior, as well as no company wants to be associated with producing any adverse events that can be avoided. I think the same level of credibility and attentiveness is brought to each effort. You can use an unapproved medical device in the United States. You get an IDE. You can, with the same number of patients, acquire the capacity to bring a device to the commercial markets in Europe. But you have a notified body who's looking over your shoulder and making sure that your quality system supports the production of devices that meet the very same standards as the very largest companies.
John?
Well, my belief is that no CE mark device is unsafe. The CE process, and indeed at the conference here, there was a good comment made. We do have a pre-market approval process in Europe, a class 3 submission, and so really it enables one to get out into the market earlier. In terms of effectiveness trials with large populations over multiple sites, clinicians at the end of the day are going to decide whether the device meets a clinical need or not. In Europe, they get the opportunity to use that technology earlier. It's going to be safe technology. Ultimately, the market that will decide whether it's a clinically effective technology. But the concept of guinea pigs, no European patient has been put at risk. They're getting an opportunity to new technology that's deemed safe. Whether it's effective, arguably you're going to get much better clinical feedback when you have a pragmatic use of the device over multiple sites in multiple countries than in the confined IDE-driven trial at 2 or 3 universities, for instance, where everything will be done in a very controlled way with expert users.
Excellent point.
Whereas in Europe, it's going to be out there in the field and it will be safe. Ultimately, if it's effective, the clinical community will decide that.
Very good. Yes. Those are the facts on the ground now. The European Commission has proposed new measures for the device regulations. How do you think this will change the reality? And in particular, I'm interested in knowing your point of view on the scrutiny procedure, which has had quite a bit of debate here already. One concern, of course, is that it may make U.S. companies think twice about a Europe-first strategy if the approval times become more significant than they are currently. Sharon, what are your thoughts on this, on the measures themselves, the scrutiny procedure, and the impact?
Well, I guess the first thing I think is really important to always understand, and it's something we say all the time to people who make decisions at a legislative level, is that it's so important for industry that this is right. Because if we do have issues where people are harmed in any way by products that are going onto the market, the organisations that will be impacted most are in fact the companies who put the product on the market. So we agree with changes that are appropriate and practical. The other thing to make clear is the whole area of predictability, and this is the big problem that we would have with the current process. So predictability is we believe missing in the current draft that's there. The whole area of scrutiny is obviously something that has come through here, which we as industry have hoped would not be needed, because as Pat O'Mahony, the CEO of the Irish Medicines Board, indicated today at the conference, there is a PMA process in place in Europe by another terminology. It's a different way, but it comes to the same thing. So we have scrutiny already, and this is going to be another level which will in fact impact on the ability for companies to know how long it will take to get their product to market. And it's that predictability that's a huge issue, particularly for startups and small companies. And again, we're constantly saying to regulators and to legislators, you need to look not just at the very large multinationals who can throw lots of people at this time and time again, but to understand that there are companies with 1, 2, 3 people in them who have very good innovative ideas, and this process needs to enable them to go to market also.
I believe you said, Stephen, that you had actually read the entire document.
I had scanned through all 196 pages, but in particular, I think the notified body model is a good model, and it enables a medical device company to have a unique vendor relationship with someone who's providing regulatory services. So as I read through the document, I saw that, well, it's possible that the notified bodies are going to have to pursue higher standards or be restricted in some way. It's possible that their expertise, their levels of expertise for particular therapies may be challenged. They may have to acquire new people. They may have to be more severe in their enforcement of certain rules. And then I guess the icing on the cake is once they've made their decision, the decision is subject to another group who you haven't had the chance to communicate with to take the record, so to speak, like a court of appeals, and tell you whether or not you've really measured up. So to some extent, I think that companies that have grown comfortable with their notified bodies now have the potential to be thrown a real curveball, and you don't know how that would work out.
Okay. How about you, John? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'd echo Sharon's comments. I mean, this industry, we produce products that affect people's lives, and regulation is both appropriate. I think the new proposed draft of the MDD isn't, from a low-risk device standpoint, really would be fairly neutral. I mean, there's some interesting things there around qualified persons, for instance, now coming into the medical device. But I mean, no one would argue that you shouldn't have the correct trained people authorizing products to be released. So from my main concern would be that the changes that are being brought in to deal with high-risk products are starting to bleed over into the way notified bodies are dealing with low-risk product submissions. And you know, today I was strongly urging that maybe we need to take a step back and stop that happening, because I think, you know, in Europe there is an erosion maybe of the competitive advantage that might exist in getting a low-risk product approved. And again, to emphasize, I'm talking about Class 2A, Class 2B products here, and not Class 3 products.
Right. And the one word I hear a lot is unpredictability. It's something you don't want to introduce into the document. It's there, perhaps.
Introducing new products is unpredictable enough. Yes. Dealing with an uncertain regulatory process makes your investors nervous. So despite the confidence you can generate about your product or your clinical results, this is just another area where uncertainty is growing. And as a result, it has a chilling effect.
I'd like to shift focus now to the United States. Over the past few months, there has been a heated debate in the U.S. about what we're calling the device tax, an excise tax of 2.3%, which is part of the Affordable Care Act, of course. Now, one of the primary complaints is that it is based on sales rather than profits and is hurting startups and innovators, or has the potential to do so. as a smaller company in the United States, Steve, what are your thoughts on this, on the device tax?
Well, I was incredulous when I found out that it would apply to revenue, not profits, so that you could be preparing your income taxes, have losses that are far exceeding your revenue, and still be subject to tax. So I would think that in the service of innovation, small companies, or at least some companies without income, shouldn't be subject to a tax. I just don't understand why that would make sense. I also think generically, it's a healthcare system that we're trying to support. I don't understand why the burden would be particularly allocated to medical device companies, or for that matter, why it wouldn't be hospitals, why it wouldn't be other healthcare services. But taxes have a way of getting passed on. They get passed on by larger entities that are commercial. I just think that for a company that's yet to hit its commercial stride, to impose a specific burden in their way makes no sense whatsoever.
Go to the Irish contingent. John, what do you think?
Well, I mean, we're selling product in the US now, and I mean, it's early stages, and I figure we might pay more for tax advice than we'll actually pay in tax. In my view, this is a tax and innovation. We're paying money that would otherwise go into R&D, early clinical work. I think there are balanced approaches on other aspects of regulatory fees. The FDA have, small business has particular sets of charges, large business has other sets of charges. And my own belief is that, below 30 million, 10 million or whatever, the amount that they're going to actually get it versus, the amount, at least the purpose that money could be put to otherwise, I really don't feel it's appropriate. It's a tax on innovation in my view.
That money could do a lot of good elsewhere, that's what you're saying, yes. Sharon, do you agree, or do you have other thoughts?
No, I agree completely, and I think what's amazing about it is that the type of tax that's been put on the industry in the US is actually the same type that's been put on cigarettes and other types of products in the US, and it doesn't make any sense to put it with that type of product. It's a healthcare industry. It's there to save lives, and it just seems, and it's also one of the top exporters for the US. It's one of the biggest growth industries, so why is that happening at all? It would be beyond belief. On top of the fact that currently there's more and more fees being put on taxes, by another word, on American companies at the moment through the new MDUFMA, through UDI legislation, different things like that. So there's a lot of things coming and that are adding more and more costs to business in the US, which is unnecessary and is to the detriment of the industry in the US, basically. A lot of companies have come out and spoken about it. So.
Yes, and Cook Medical has even said we're not opening up any more factories here or any more facilities. And to wrap up, I appreciate your time, I really do. And staying with the U.S., we have an election coming up. Do you think, or do you think that the results will have any sort of impact on the medical device industry? Does it matter? Steve, since you're the American here.
I'm sure the results will have an impact, but I would be surprised if we've learned enough during the election to know what the impact will be. I think that the healthcare law is very confusing, but has many benefits that are very popular. And I think that we even heard Governor Romney only 10 days ago say that he would overturn the Obama legislation, but he would keep everything that was popular. So I'm not really sure even what we'd be arguing about. But the fundamental fact is that if this were 4 years ago, and we were talking about the upcoming election, we'd be saying there are 40 million uninsured people in the United States. And as a result of this legislation, that situation will be far less than it ever was. And that's got to be good for medical device businesses and people that work to save lives. So I think that ultimately the U.S. will realize that the medical device industry is quite important. Certainly in Massachusetts, that's one of the top performing industries. And I think that although people often threaten suicide, it's often just a threat.
Very good point. For Europe, of course, the healthcare situation in the United States is somewhat baffling, I understand that. But John, do you have any thoughts on how the results of the election might affect the industry? Since it is a global industry and the United States carries a lot of weight.
The biggest market. I wouldn't be, I'd echo your comments, to be honest, that in the main, the act has been very positive in what it sought out to achieve. I think perhaps my only thought in terms of what might affect our industry here in Europe might be in what happens in terms of repatriation of overseas taxes and the views of either party in that regard. I mean, there has been some noises in the last 6 months around that issue by the Democrats, but I guess I can't say I know the Republicans' views on that particular issue. Indeed, there are many other views I'm not sure I know of the Republicans in this election, but I think that's probably going to be a more interesting issue in terms of affecting a very large medical device industry in Ireland. I mean, we have, 15 of the top 20 American medical device companies have their facilities in Ireland right now, and that issue I think is going to be an important one in the next year.
I'm sure in Ireland they will be paying close attention to this. Right?
Absolutely, it's really important. And I just come back from AdvaMed last week as well, so had the pleasure of hearing various representatives of both the President and the Governor speaking on this particular topic. And what was quite interesting was that they agreed on most things. So, they're not as far apart as one might think looking at it from a distance. But the big issue is going to be obviously on the device tax, and Governor Romney said he's not going to have it, and President Obama says he will. So we have, obviously got two square pegs put straight up in front of everybody to look at right now. But I think your money would have to be on President Obama at the moment by a slight mark. But
slight margin, it seems to be. But yes. Well, listen, I'd really appreciate the insights. I know you have dinners to attend, planes to catch, and it's been a long day. So thank you very much, and thank you, and goodbye from Brussels.